Welcome back to the Unsolicited Film Reviews podcast. Yep, we're back on YouTube, so make sure to like and subscribe. We've been getting a fair amount of views, but we're still only at 4 subscribers. So come on, let's get to it. Chop chop. Tell your friends and make sure to hit that subscribe button so we know you're actually watching and it's not just bots.
Yeah, it would really help us out. So do us a solid.
So I'm Zach Miller, and the guy you just heard was Martin Cook, as always. And this past Sunday was the Grammys, and for my money, it's always been the least credible of the major award shows. So to counter that, I'm going to for the viewers, I'm going to throw on my Bianca outfit for you guys. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to get naked on the show.
Oh, jeez. Oh, that Bianca outfit. Yeah, no, none of that. Nobody needs any of that.
So yeah, the Grammys is always more about style than substance, and I know music is subjective, but it seems like the best albums never win anymore. I don't know, maybe that's just me getting old, but anyway, to counter that, what we decided to do is bring you a podcast about music in film, and specifically composers and their scores in film. So what we're gonna do, we each picked 5 of our favorite slash some of the more prolific composers in film history, and we're just gonna bring you their bios and a couple of clips from their songs and talk about how important music is in film. Sound good, Martin?
That sounds good to me. Yeah. So just a couple of caveats. One is that yeah, this is film scores, so music and film. We're not talking about songs in film. I mean, that might make a great podcast on its own, but that's not what we're talking about here. The other thing is, yeah, this obviously isn't an exhaustive list. This is just 5 that we each find interesting and thought were important to talk about. And then finally, the other caveat, the other thing we should say is that you will notice that of the 10 that we're going to talk about, there are no women in that list. And that, has nothing to do with ability, but more historical inequity in the film industry, that they just haven't had, as many opportunities. There are only 2 women who have ever won won the Oscar for Best Original Score. That was Rachel Portman in 1997 for Emma, of all things, and Hildur Gudnadottir, I'm sure I'm not pronouncing that correctly, Icelandic name, in 2020 for Joker. So, there are great female composers out there, and they're starting to get more opportunities, thankfully. If we do this podcast in 20 years, hopefully there'll be a few women on our list. But alas, unfortunately, there will not be today.
Yeah, that's a fascinating fact, especially with the whole Me Too and just a driving force to get more diversity in every aspect of film. It seems like the music category has kind of just snuck under the radar. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it's like, 100-year history of the Oscars, and only 2 times has a woman won Best Original Score. Yeah, that's been the film industry up till now.
Yeah, and music to the casual watcher is sometimes not even that noticeable in film, but I would argue that it's just as, if not more important than dialogue. Because if we go back to the advent of film in the 20s, there was a dialogue. It was just music and little subtitles that let you know what was happening. So it really immerses you in the world, and I think it's one of the more important aspects of filmmaking as a whole.
It really is. Yeah. And I actually had that same note written down in my notes about, yeah, from the advent of film. I mean, sometimes it was just a guy sitting at a piano in the theater as the actual film was playing, and that was the musical accompaniment. But that's all people heard in the silent era was just the music. So yes, been very important since the very beginning. And you're absolutely right. It continues to be crucial. I would say that there's different levels of scores, and some are just there and that kind of set the mood, and some are just more like background music. the best scores, though, and and then some really elevate the film.
Mm.
And I would say, like, kind of to your point, the best scores don't just elevate the films, but they're part of the storytelling itself. And hopefully, some of the selections that we have for you today will illustrate that.
Exactly. So if you don't have anything more to add, why don't we just get straight into the first composer?
Let's do it.
Okay. So my first pick is Harry Gregson-Williams. He is a British composer, and he's done a myriad of films. One of my favorites being that we're not going to play a clip of the it's Team America World Police. I didn't realize that until I started doing some research into it, so that was funny. But you want to go ahead and play the first clip for us?
Sure. Here we go.
Yeah, so that was from Kingdom of Heaven, the 2005 Ridley Scott epic about the Crusades. And what I think Gregson Williams does really well here is he gets you into the world, and it sounds very it's a great mesh between the Muslim world and the Christian world in that time. It really draws you in, and yeah, I think it's a really good piece just on its own, and that's everything that I picked tonight. You can just listen to in your car, and it sounds pretty good because I'm a fan of world music and stuff like that. So uh, while Harry Grayson Williams has never even been nominated for an Oscar, he has a prolific catalog, and that includes the Chronicles of Narnia, a couple of X-Men movies, the much maligned Gladiator too. Yeah, he's a collaborator with Ridley Scott and a lot of stuff, and he's also the older brother of Rupert Gregson Williams, who is a very good composer in his own right. But just to show off his range, you want to play that second clip?
Sure.
Yeah, so completely different kind of vibe. That was from Shrek. That's the romantic theme from Shrek. And again, just that one was just like so rich, and the way it builds, and it makes you think you're watching a fairy tale, which in essence you are. But Shrek turns all those tropes on its head, and he has a lot of other compositions on in those soundtracks that kind of combat this piece, but it just really lulls you into a sense of, oh yeah, this is going to be such a great little fairy tale. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, I think that's great, and just anybody who's watching this on YouTube, you probably will throughout this entire podcast see us kind of like vibing out to the songs, but that's what I mean. It's all such great music, and you just you feel it, and you just kind of have to do that if you're just sitting here listening to it. I think you're absolutely right about Harry Gregson Williams, and I really loved your point about the Kingdom of Heaven soundtrack, which I hadn't really put my finger on it before, but you're absolutely right that he involves little like sounds and themes that are both a mix of kind of Western European sounds with kind of the Islamic world sounds, and yeah, that's a very good point.
thank you. Any do you have any thoughts on HGW?
No, I mean, I think you kind of covered all of them. You're right. I mean, he's pretty prolific. It is kind of surprising that he hasn't been nominated for an Oscar. I think all of mine have been, um, but uh, but yeah, it's that's surprising because he has been around for a while and he's done a lot of different movies.
Yeah, you got all your highfalutin, I guess.
Well, I mean, not necessarily all highfalutin, but we'll see as we
Yeah,
get to a
but
couple.
he's still only in his early 60s, so I'm hoping that his time will come because he like I said, he's very, very prolific and he deserves a shot.
That is the thing about film composers; they can go for a long time. Some of them are pretty old, as a few of them on my list here. Yeah, so including the first one I'm going to talk about, who is no longer alive but wrote for a long time, and that's John Barry, who was born November 3rd, 1933, in York, England.
So we
And
got two
died,
Brits so far.
sorry, yes,
Two
that's
two
right.
Brits, yeah.
Yep. And he died January 30th, 2011. So he's been gone for a little over a decade now. He won 5 Oscars and was nominated for 2 others. So that's a pretty good batting average to have won 5 of 7. He's probably best known for scoring 11 of the James Bond movies. Um, and as well as a number of the songs from the James Bond films, including like Goldfinger, Diamonds Are Forever. The Bond theme is actually a bit contested, but it seems like the hook, like the guitar riff hook, was probably written by a guy named Monty Norman. He's credited, but certainly the Barry is responsible for the arrangement that we're all familiar with the sort of big brassy sound and jazzy sound and all that. So, with that said, let's give a listen. So there at the end, that's where you can really hear the brass kick in, and I love that part. I mean, the song is just it just takes me back. I'm a big fan of James Bond movies, as I've said before in the past, and so that song just always has a soft spot in my heart. Um, but yeah, the fact that he kind of did basically scores for 11 of them is pretty amazing. But that's obviously not all he did. He did a number of notable films. He kept writing pretty much up until near the time he was dead. Some other notable films he did The Cotton Club, Out of Africa, Howard the Duck, randomly, Chaplin, which I think was another one that he won an Oscar for. Um, so, a wide variety of things. And to show that off, so obviously he could do kind of like the brassy James Bond theme type stuff, but he could also do beautiful orchestral music, like the one I'm about to play, which comes, I think, from another movie for which he won the Oscar, and that's Dances with Wolves.
Mm.
And this is a song called the John Dunbar theme. So again, just sort of, more kind of traditional but very beautiful orchestral music. So the Doodad Rage. So
Yeah, it's been forever since I've seen Dances with Wolves, but yeah, that's a beautiful piece.
it really is. Yeah. Yeah, a lot of that soundtrack is very much like that. I mean, again, the best music fits with the film, and it's really evocative of kind of like the wide open spaces in that film and of the plains and all that. So yeah, again, good stuff by Mr. John Barry.
Yeah, and just the James Bond theme is just so fun. Like, and I guess you said it's contested, but technically, I guess he's still scoring it, even posthumously, because they're going to use that in perpetuity. Otherwise, it ceases to be a James Bond film.
Yeah, I think technically credits for the song are Monty Norman and John Barry. Uh,
Mm,
but it's just they've had some legal battles over it over the years. But yeah, so we'll say they're both credited.
yeah, great pick.
What you got next?
So my next one is much more well known for being a television composer than a film composer, but he has done some films, so it seemed it can still fit in there. And that's my boy Ramin Djawadi of Game of Thrones fame. You want to roll that one?
Yes, here we go.
Yeah, so I chose that piece instead of just the Game of Thrones theme slash House of the Dragon theme because they're the same. But that just
I really should
that
have let him yeah, write another.
let the man cook. He's obviously a very capable composer.
Yeah.
But anyway, I chose that because that's the song that we roll out of Game of Thrones with. And while it's, the motifs are obviously very similar to the intro, he adds that the chorus, and he starts out with the violin, and it he was such a master of kind of wrapping all those motifs into telling a story throughout the series. And I think he's one of the most consistent players in that entire series, whether it's writing, directing, acting. He really, really brings that world alive with his music. And one of the directives he had at the beginning was that it's a fantasy series, but we don't want any flutes. So it makes it
Oh,
feel
interesting.
very, very real when it's just strings, percussion, the vocals, and I really enjoyed that last theme because it kind of wraps everything up in a very tidy package, which the creators of the show failed to do.
Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, if only they had done as good a job as he did. Yeah, well, one thing that I really appreciate him, and it's something actually that I'll talk about later on from one of my other guys, is that he's really good at having little themes for each sort of person, and
Hmm.
then tying them in together when in scenes in the show. There's a couple of characters, and he'll tie in a couple of themes together into whatever overall, sort of song he's playing at the time. He's really good at that.
Right. And he did win two consecutive Emmy Awards in 2018 and 2019. Never been nominated for any of his films, but he has done quite a few films, including Pacific Rim, Warcraft, the original Iron Man, and Eternals. He's got a foray into the Marvel universe, and also quite a few video games, including Medal of Honor, Gears of War. So he's a busy guy, and this is a kind of a snobby category, but there's room for best composers in television as well, because when you have to score a series for 7, 8 seasons, that's got to be tough
Oh,
as opposed
absolutely.
to just doing a 2 hour film.
Yeah, no, I doubt any other fellow composers are looking at him and going, "Oh, pff, just TV." I'm sure everybody recognizes how good he is.
Yeah, and just to show off his range, you want to play that second one?
Yeah.
Yeah, so you see the range there. That's the first time piano was used in the world of Westeros, and that piece is called Light of the Seven, and it's right before, spoiler for Game of Thrones, Cersei just blows the shit out of everybody. So as soon as you hear piano in a series that's 6 seasons that is in its sixth season, you're like, okay, something's askew. Something's gonna happen here that we haven't seen before. So the way he did that with introducing a brand new instrument that we haven't heard in the series before, it's just a brilliant move, and it just speaks to how skilled he is at inhabiting a world and then bringing it to us.
Yeah, I still remember hearing that for the first time watching. And it's episode 10 of season 6, right?
Yeah.
And just everything. It's the very beginning of the episode, and it's the setup as everybody's kind of going uh, to this big meeting where there's supposed to be a trial and there's supposed to be some other things happening, and you just see the entire setup as this repetitive and yet expanding music is happening, and it's just captivating. It's really, I mean, the actual song is about 10 minutes long. We only played obviously a short clip of it, but highly recommend everybody to listen to the whole thing, and well, and actually go back and watch it in conjunction with the beginning of that episode because it's
Yeah,
just a
because
perfect example of music and the film working in harmony to tell the story.
yeah, and it builds to such an epic climax. Obviously, we can't just sit here and listen to the entire goddamn thing, but yeah, it is such a great build. Like any classical composer would be envious of the way that he was able to do that. And yeah, he's still working on House of the Dragon. I don't know if he's signed on to do the Night of the Seven Kingdoms series that's coming this year, but he's done more work on Game of Thrones than anybody else has.
Yeah, as you said, he's
So
really busy, so I don't know if he'll have time to do that one too. But you never know.
And he also went, it was a protege of Hans Zimmer.
Oh, I don't think I knew that. Interesting. Very good to know. All right, so my next one is actually a team, and it's like Ramin Djawadi. It's a more current team of composers, and that's Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross. Reznor was born in 1965, May 17th, and Atticus Ross was born January 16th, 1968, in London. So he's British and Reznor's American. They together, despite not being together as a composing team for very long, have already won 2 Oscars, and they've been nominated for 3. Reznor obviously is remembered very well as kind of the lead guy for Nine Inch Nails, especially throughout the 90s. He started working with Atticus Ross in about 2002 when Ross moved to the US, and he was a producer and synthesizer programmer at the time. Um, but since then, they've done a bunch of things together. Atticus Ross, I think, technically now is a member of Nine Inch Nails, whatever that means. But so Reznor had actually done music for a short before, but that's really about it when they made their foray. And their first feature that they did was The Social Network. And it became instantly obvious that this was going to be an amazing sort of second chapter of their lives. It's one of the ones that they got an Oscar for. And in my opinion, it was just an absolutely brilliant score. And here's a taste of that. So I mean, that's a tune called "Hand Covers Bruise," and the thing I love about that is like I love how the melody is so simple and almost sweet, but with a bit of a hint of melancholy. But then underneath, there's this distorted noise, which is sort of like an indication that this isn't all right, and there's underlying problems here that are underlying all this stuff. This tale of this inventor guy in college, and so yeah, that's I just love that soundtrack.
Yeah, I have not gone back to listen to it just on its own, but there is, yeah, it's very melodic, like you said, very sweet on top, but there's this undercurrent of absolute chaos
Yeah,
with the strings, and I think that's a great metaphor for social media as a whole. So,
exactly.
yeah, that's very deep. Yeah, that's a good choice.
And yeah, so I mean, look, Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, they obviously have a very notable sound. A lot of their things are very sort of atmospheric, but they're starting to stretch their legs a little bit. And here's an example of that from the movie Soul, the animated film. The other one where they won an Oscar, along with John Baptiste, although they didn't really necessarily work together. Like it wasn't the three of them. They did some songs, John Baptiste did some other songs, and then sometimes he would play on some other things. And so this particular tune, which is called Pursuit Terry's World, it almost sounds like that it should be one of the John Baptiste's ones, but it's actually one of their songs. And so I think it shows. I mean, obviously they were learning from him as this process was going on, but it shows that they have the talent to spread their rings a little bit. So here's that. So yeah, just an interest, very kind of jazzy and totally different for Reznor, but I love that he's got that in there. Some other notable films they've done in their short time together is Girl with Dragon Tattoo, Gone Girl, Mank, The Killer, the recent Soderbergh film. Um, and now I'll play one more that I think is one that you don't like, Zach.
If you're gonna play what I think you're gonna play, I thought it was actually the best part of the movie.
Okay, okay, good. Because at first I was going to say I wasn't big on it either. This is going to be a song from the movie Challengers. But then hearing some of the interviews, it's very clear that this is what the director Luca Guadagnino wanted. Um, And so my issue at times with the music in that film is that it's almost too overpowering. But more than that, it was used often in the film, like in the place of dialogue and story itself. Like it was obviously signaling as people were just sitting there, and it was signaling, "Hey, everybody, pay attention. This is really important." So, so the
Exactly.
more I think about it, I don't actually think that was their fault. This is what the director asked them to do, and in some ways, it's almost too good for the film because it does kind of overpower in a way. But anyway, I think it's obviously an interesting, powerful piece of electronic music. So I just thought I'd play a bit of that, and that's let me put the sound back up. That is one, and this is actually the title track. It's called Challengers. So I love it's very reminiscent, obviously, of Nine Inch Nails stuff. Um,
I forgot my glow sticks.
yeah. The thing I love about that actually is it's really the melody that's been being played by that bass riff that comes
Mm.
in underneath after a little bit, and I just really like that. So anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there because it's more um, indicative of their style. So I just thought I'd play that.
Yeah, and you're so right that whenever the movie got like really boring, which was a lot, they kick in this bass, just like oh boom, doom, 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 doom. It's like oh yeah, and you're so right. It's like focus your attention on this. So yeah, God, that movie was such a disappointment. But yeah, the score
Some
was
people
actually
loved it, but the two
yeah,
of us were not amongst that group.
yeah, and I wanted that. Yeah, okay. I don't want to talk about challengers.
Yeah, okay, let's move on.
You can see my review on the website. Okay, so next up for me is Mr. Howard Shore, a Canadian. We got a Canuck in the running here.
Woohoo!
So he has, well, let's just get this out of the way. He's won 3 Oscars for Lord of the Rings, Martin.
Hmm? Oh, you
Oh, okay. 1 second. Okay, yeah. So he's had another prolific career. He's been in the game for over 40 years now. A lot of collaborations with David Cronenberg, and he did the score for everything from Silence of the Lambs to Lord of the Rings. And go ahead and roll Silence of the Lambs.
Yep. Right here. So we're starting this one a little bit into it. Here we go.
Yeah, so for context, that plays over the opening credits, which is just Jodie Foster's character Clarice running through a forest as a FBI trainee. But again, this is an example of music elevating the piece because you're like, wow, we're in for something crazy if this is the music that's playing when we're just watching a woman run through the forest. And she and yeah, and Howard Shore does just an excellent job of telling us this is going to be a thriller.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that he's really good at, I mean, obviously he's been in some of the biggest and most important movies of the last, I mean, he's done the score for, he hasn't been in them, I don't think. He's done the score for some of the biggest, most important movies of the last, what, 30, 40 years, 30 years at least. And the one thing that he's really good at is just capturing the tone of the moment in the movie. Like you can tell from that example, you've got another example coming up. He just manages to capture what the feeling of that moment should be at any time in a film. And he's just really good at that.
Yeah, and such a mundane, a seemingly mundane moment as just a woman jogging through the woods seems very epic
Yeah,
just through the score.
yeah. But obviously, yeah, there's like an ominous, oppressive thing, and there's a lot going in, even going on in that little clip there, right? You've got, sort of oboes and clarinets and violins and second violins coming in and out with their own little like themes and melodies. It's really complex, and I think again, that's yeah, to your point, it's a nice juxtaposition to just this simple thing of her running through the woods. It's letting the audience know, no, there's a lot of complex shit coming on.
And it's not like she's running from something.
Nope.
She's just working out.
Yeah, she's doing PE in the
Yeah.
FBI training center or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a great piece. And then sorry to kind of tease y'all, but let's just cue up that Lord of the Rings.
There we go.
And of course, the whole Lord of the Rings series is filled with epic scores like that. But that's the one that just always gave me goosebumps because again, he takes kind of a secondary mundane scene of just what was it? Yeah, Pippin. Pippin lighting the beacons to send a message to Rohan for send aid to Gondor. But god damn, the way that builds just in that 30-second clip is amazing, and it just goes to show that he can take these kind of seemingly little moments and just blow them up into cinematic masterpieces.
Yeah, the buildup of that is incredible. And as you say, I mean that piece is called "The Lighting of the Beacons." And really, what we're seeing, yeah, we see Pippin run up, but then really what we're seeing throughout that clip or throughout that piece of music is just basically little fires coming on. And that's kind of all it is.
Mm.
I mean, it's spectacular visually because you're looking across wide vistas and mountains and all the great things about Lord of the Rings. But as you say, it's really kind of simple. It's just these little lights. But that music, the buildup makes it feel like, wow, we're really something important is really happening here. Uh, Great stuff. Oh, love it. I'm a
Yeah,
huge
because
Lord of the Rings fan, as I've mentioned before, and man, that gives me goosebumps.
it is a huge moment because it finally links the two remaining kingdoms of men together so that they can link up and fight against the forces of Mordor. But yeah, but just a couple of fires lighting up across mountains. It could have been it could have fallen very flat if it wasn't for the score.
Agree. Yeah.
So, like I said, yeah, he won Oscars for all three of those. So good for him. And yeah, he's a Toronto native.
Woohoo. All right. My next one is definitely not. Well, he's no longer alive, but that is Ennio Morricone, who was born November 10th, 1928 in Roma. And he died in Rome again in July of 2020. So not that long ago. He won only one Oscar and was nominated six times. He has 546 credits for composing on IMDb,
Unreal.
which Just think of that. That's incredible. Even John Williams only has like 177, 546 credits. That is just ridiculous. That is just incredibly prolific. I'll start with his work on spaghetti westerns, which is probably how he became known to North American audiences. He did A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, but he's probably, of course, best known for this. Um, from The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, which has become so iconic. It's basically a code for any kind of showdown at this point. So yeah, anytime, all you have to do is play that little tune and you can just imagine people having a showdown of some sort. And so I think it's just become that ingrained in popular culture that it's almost a stand-in for that kind of situation.
Yeah, and as iconic as that is, I don't even know if it's the most iconic song in that particular soundtrack because what is it? The Color of Gold, I believe, where the final showdown with the just the again we can't play that one because again I think it's like 7.5 minutes long, but the build to the final showdown between Clint Eastwood and his enemies in that one is just
Yeah,
insanely epic.
yeah. Yeah, I agree. I mean, he obviously with that many films and to his name, he did a ton of Italian films, most of which I've never heard of. But he did keep coming back to Hollywood throughout. And here's another one that he did that shows he could do really interesting percussive music to kind of help drive action. So this is a tune called "The Strength of the Righteous." Love that title. And it's from The Untouchables from 1987.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So I mean, the thing I love about that, the constant beat underneath it all, which kind of keeps pushing it and propelling it forward, and then all these weird kind of syncopated rhythms on top of it. It just really gives you a sense of action and intrigue, and I just think it's a very interesting piece of music.
Yeah, I was gonna say it gives you a sense of urgency
Yeah,
because I mean
absolutely.
you have Elliot Ness chasing down Al Capone and it's an all out bloody war and yeah, it's so easy to forget how good a score is if it's not like something that sticks in in your brain because it's not necessarily that catchy. Like I don't think I'd listen to that one in the car,
No.
but but
I'd be driving like a maniac
yeah.
at the end, switching lanes every two.
But yeah, it just kind of puts you on edge,
Yeah.
and that's exactly what it's meant to do, and that's what the film's meant to do. So again, perfect.
So, but then to show his range, I'll play one more from him because he was also capable of just absolutely beautiful, haunting music, like this one. And this is a tune called Gabriel's Oboe, and it comes from one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, a movie called The Mission. from 1986. So.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I've never seen The Mission.
You know, oh wow, yeah, you have to see the mission.
Yeah, put
It's,
that.
I mean, by today's standards, it's 1986. People probably would think it's a bit slow, but I think it's an absolutely incredible movie and just completely augmented by the score of Ennio Morricone.
Yeah, and didn't even play the Oscar-winning one, which he won for the Hateful Eight, right?
Yes, no, I didn't,
Yeah,
but yeah,
but it's not one of his best. I think that was more of a lifetime achievement award,
I think it
honestly.
was. Yeah, yeah. I forgot to mention that, but yeah. So some of the other things that he's done that he's notable for, Hateful Eight, for which he won his Oscar, and I think you're right. I think it wasn't definitely amongst his best, but at that point, people were like, "Holy shit, Ennio Morricone's never won an Oscar,"
Yeah.
and so they gave him one for that. But he did, he scored The Thing, kind of a
Mm.
cult classic. Once
Hmm.
Upon a Time in America, Cinema Paradiso, Bugsy. Like the guy did a lot of different kinds of movies.
Yeah, he's yeah, 500 plus movies. God damn, that's insane.
Ridiculous.
All right, so we're getting down to the nitty-gritty here. Now, this one is my personal favorite of all time, and that would be Mr. James Horner. He is a two-time Oscar winner for Titanic and Braveheart. And uh, yeah, like I said, my all-time fave. He tragically died in a helicopter accident in 2015, and not a lot of celebrity deaths have moved me in the way that James Horner died. I actually cried when he died because he was a he basically wrote the he basically wrote the music of my movie-going childhood. He was the composer behind American Tail, Braveheart, um, one of my all-time favorites, The Mask of Zorro. But you want to just go ahead and play that first one?
Sure.
Yeah, so again, he really does a good job of setting up the tone and the stakes of that was Braveheart, by the way. Setting up the tone and the stakes of this film, and Horner was a huge fan of like the Celtic influence, and that kind of infiltrates the majority of his scores, honestly. And yeah, like I said, won an Oscar for Braveheart, and he just elevates the product once again.
Yeah, he really does. I think actually I screwed up on the clip there. I just noticed in my notes you said 2045 and not and I started at 045. But actually, in a way, I'm glad I did because it still caught some of the, the beautiful opening themes. But then just near the end of that, what we were hearing were some like discordant notes coming in underneath.
Mhm.
And again, just playing along with the movie. I mean, it starts and it's almost this idyllic, I mean, existence for as much as, poor people in the Scottish Highlands could have had an idyllic existence, but it seems very kind of pastoral and nice and people are getting along. But then obviously, there's stuff on the horizon and as soon as he meets the girl and then, the English lord wants to, invoke prima nocte and all this kind of stuff. But so I think that music actually kind of captures that, this kind of nice existence that's slowly being undercut by something else.
Yeah, yeah, there were no bagpipes in that, but
All right. Yeah, that was definitely my fault.
no, no worries. So, yeah, let's just go ahead and play that next clip then. Yeah, so that was from An American Tail in 1986, one of my more formative movies growing up. And this is back from the era where Steven Spielberg and Don Bluth were teaming up and trying to take down Disney as an animation studio. And they made a fair dent in the market because Disney was flailing in the 80s, and all of a sudden ambient entertainment came up and released some great hits, including An American Tail, which is one of the greatest immigration tales in modern movie history, honestly. And I know it's about a Jewish mouse fleeing the Bolshevik cats, but it winds up being a fantastic metaphor, especially for kids. So, uh, and with the violin there, it's almost akin to something like Schindler's List that would come 8 years later. So he was ahead of the game there.
Yeah, James Horner is one of these guys that just really uses like all parts of the orchestra.
Mm.
His stuff is really like it's really symphonic. It and just yeah, I don't need to go on too much longer on that, but I just love how he has such a full sound, uses all these different instruments and weaves these themes throughout. It's just really incredible stuff.
And then we might as well go to the coup de grace.
Let's do it.
and that is from Titanic, at the time, the highest grossing movie of all time. And that's the theme when we first see the Titanic in all its glory. And again, it just really elevates the shot when you see this massive ship, and you see Rose, played by Kate Winslet, come out, and she's beautiful. Yeah. Exactly. and
That's my
and while
Rose impression with her big brimmed hat.
and while she's unimpressed, the rest of us totally are, because that score mixed with the images just again makes it, you know, Titanic gets poo-pooed on a lot by like film nerds, quote unquote, but I mean, at the end of the day, you have to admit that it's very well made, and it plays to its audience.
Oh, it really does. Yeah, no, I mean it's an incredible movie in many senses. Yeah, the story and whatever is people can quibble with, but in that little clip there, I mean, I think I love that you chose that instead of the familiar Titanic theme.
Oh,
I
Celine
think it's
Dion.
well, no, but the actual theme that song
Oh, oh,
comes out
oh.
of
The
is
the vocal thing where it's like, oh,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But on the vocals, I mean, he did use a lot of vocals in the score for the
Sure.
movie, and I think in this particular moment, it's really good because it does sort of express that sense of kind of wonder and awe that people must have felt, and we do as the audience when we first see the big ship on the big screen like that. So I think, yeah, he really captured that.
Yeah, so again, my for me, he's the GOAT, but I know a lot of people will disagree, and will.
Well, I mean, yeah, you named some of the ones that he did, but man, he had so many big important movies that he did the score of. As you say, soundtrack for a lot of people's lives in a way.
Yeah, and for him to just suddenly die like that in a tragic helicopter accident was just devastating for me. So, because I think he still had a lot ahead of him.
Probably, yeah. I mean, as we see, I mean, a lot of these guys keep going until they're like 80s, 90s. So, yeah. All right. My next one is relatively young. He's only in his 70s. Um, it's Alan Silvestri, who was born March 26, 1950 in New York City. Um, he actually has never won an Oscar, but he has been nominated two times. And I wanted to highlight him because he's done, a lot of great music, obviously, for one thing. But for somebody with relatively few accolades compared to some of the other people that we have on this list, I think he's sort of had an outsized influence on pop culture and film culture um, through a few of his scores, and maybe none so more than the one I'll start with right here. All right, so that was obviously Back to the Future. One of the greatest films ever made, in my opinion. Um, and that's not it's just great bombastic stuff, which Silvestri does very, very well. But he's also capable of like little flights of whimsy in his music. Like if you think about the opening themes of Back to the Future, they're totally different. Not that main theme that we just played there, but the opening. with the little like flittering twinkle sound, using the chimes and an instrument that that's actually called rub rods. Yes, really. I had to look that up because I was like, what is it that makes that ding ding ding? And that sound at the beginning and throughout Back to the Future, like when we first see the DeLorean and stuff. And yes, they're called rub rods. They're kind of what you expect. They're almost like these chimes, and you kind of I should stop doing hand motions, but they're actually used in quite a few film scores. I realized. But anyway, all that to say that that Silvestri can do sort of both the big, loud, bombastic and kind of the little whimsical type stuff as well. He's done a lot of different films. Some other notable films he's done: Predator, Who Filmed Roger Rabbit, The Abyss, Forrest Gump, Castaway, Night at the Museum, and fairly recently Ready Player One, where he reprised some of his familiar themes, including from Back to the Future, and Captain America, the first Avenger, which brought him into the Marvel fold. Um, and that's again where he's had, I would say, like a massive influence on popular culture and film culture. And so this next one that I'm going to play, um, I had a hard time actually choosing which one to pick, just because there's, I mean, even from this one movie, which is going to be from Avengers Infinity War, there are so many just great moments that I remember watching this in the theater. And, this was an experience watching this movie in
Oh,
the theater,
absolutely.
and the music played a big part of it. And a couple of moments were so aided by the music that they got big rounds of applause from the audience and stuff like that. And I think this moment right here, I'll just play it, and then you can see if you can remember what it's from. Got maybe the biggest applause in the whole movie, but let's go ahead. This is no, I won't give away what it's called yet.
Okay, so the listening audience can't see this, but I've had a shit-eating grin on my face ever since I think I recognize this. But is this Bring Me Thanos?
Yeah, it is. It
Yes.
is when Thor arrives on the battlefield. Yeah, and the song is the tune is called Forge. And I
Mm,
actually started it about 3 minutes in because it starts with the pieces of the axe coming
hmm
together. Um, and yeah, I just love that. I love how so there's all this kind of the turmoil and stuff going on at first from where I started it, and then which is going on the battlefield, and then there's a bit of a buildup, and then it quiets right down for a moment, and then there's more, and then just like another steady buildup until the main Avengers theme as Thor arrives on the battlefield. It's just an incredible piece of music. Gives me goosebumps, and in the theater, yeah, everybody was like clapping and cheering and hooting and hollering in that moment.
Yeah, I got goosebumps as well. Yeah, that theater experience was. unparalleled. Honest, those last two Avengers films were just like moments in time. Like you had to be there to witness just the frenzy of all these hardcore fans that have been there for 20 plus movies. And yeah, man, fucking Silvestri just
He
brought it
nailed it.
home. Yeah,
Yeah,
he brought it home every time he had to, and yeah, he absolutely fucking nailed it. Yeah,
yeah.
just bring me Thanos, and just
Yeah, I
bomb.
mean, obviously, yeah, the directing, the acting, the special effects, all that was amazing. But without that music, that those moments would not have had the impact
No,
that they
no,
did.
not at all.
The
Especially
drama.
since it's been so tantric because that was the original Avengers theme. Would that come out in like 2011 or something like that?
Something like that.
2012? Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they've had the same theme, but the way they were, it's almost like Ramin Djawadi, where he's able to just have these character themes and just yeah, just build everything up into this epic climax. And while Avengers landed the ending a lot better just as a whole, but anyway, yeah, yeah, great choice.
Yeah. All right, last two.
And I
Like
think
two
any
most obvious ones.
yeah, if anybody's been listening this long, you can probably tell what our last two are going to be. And we didn't want to blow our load super early and have some of the more obscure guys come in. But so my last one is Hans Zimmer. If you know movie scores, you know Hans Zimmer. He has won two Academy Awards for The Lion King and Dune. He was ineligible this year for Dune 2, which was kind of a controversy, but I mean, it was kind of just reused stuff for the most part. So I don't understand that grade quite as much.
No, that
But
was actually one of my very tiny complaints about the movie was that there wasn't more that there weren't more original musical themes. Like I thought he should have expanded a lot more instead of reusing some of the stuff from the first one. But anyway,
and Hans has collaborated with Christopher Nolan a lot with the Dark Knight trilogy, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Inception, uh, and his actually his protege Ludwig Göransson was an Academy Award winner last year for Oppenheimer. So whatever school Hans Zimmer has, he's pumping out a lot of good pupils. So, want to give us a sample of one of his good ones?
there we go.
Yeah, so it's funny that
Could have kept
in
that one running. I wasn't sure where to stop because it's so good.
yeah, it's so driving, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh, but it's funny that you use the word bombastic to describe Silvestri because if there's one word I would use to describe Hans Zimmer, it is bombastic.
absolutely. Yeah,
He is just the king of just the epic. I mean, if you listen to any of his scores, they're just it's just so big and just again elevating the piece. When I first saw Pirates of the Caribbean back in '03 in theaters, I left the theater with one of my buddies just being like, "Oh my God, they made that out of a Disney ride? That's one of the most entertaining movies I've ever seen." And you know, the Pirates franchise has fallen off precipitously over the three, four, five that they've done. But that first one is one of my all-time favorite movies, and you know, Hans Zimmer was an integral part of that.
yeah. It's I mean it's just a lot. It's so much fun. That first movie, you just can't help but have a good time. It basically, it's more fun than a ride. It is a ride. And you're right. Hans Zimmer is such a big part of that, just for that driving theme. But yeah, bombastic is a great word to describe his music. But I think more than anything else, it's the sounds he uses on almost all his scores. They're just so full.
Mm,
Like it's not like, I mean, he'll sometimes he will have single notes like in Dunkirk, that almost like the almost like ticking clock of the strings. But even that, it's like strings. It's not just one string. It's like everything sounds so big and full in all his scores. Um, just yeah, there's nobody like Hans Zimmer really.
right. And longtime listeners slash readers will know that The Lion King is my favorite Disney movie, if not my favorite movie of all time. And you want to just go ahead and play some King of Pride Rock?
Sure do. Here we go.
Yeah, it's just so fucking amazing. And a lot of times people think of Lion King and they think of, great Disney songs written by Tim Rice and Elton John, but the underlying score is just like, oh, Hans Zimmer's here too. So, but yeah,
Yeah, hard to go wrong with that.
so that plays when Simba is walking up to reclaim his throne as king, and ever since I was, what was I, 6 or 7 years old, that just filled my heart, and again, goosebumps, and just it's so fucking epic, especially just for a lion walking walking up a little rock,
Yeah.
but it makes that film just so fucking glorious.
And
And
when that came out, I mean, Disney animated movies, as you mentioned earlier, Disney had kind of fallen off in the 70s and 80s. And Disney animated films were not the big massive experiences that they are today. And The Lion King was one of the first ones to start reviving that whole thing. Um, and yeah, for them to have such a, as you say, just like an epic soundtrack for an animated film like that, just was an incredible step up for all of Disney animation in a way.
yeah, and honestly, that's a song I want played at my funeral.
Nice.
I'm not even joking. Just
I,
because
I've got a few songs tucked away too. I got to write down somewhere.
it's so meaningful, and it brings back like the whole circle of life, and Mufasa and his son just remember who you are. It's a very very emotional song every time I hear it. But not to be completely outdone, Hans Zimmer is not just bombastic in all of his pieces. He has a lot of range as well. And another one of my absolute favorite soundtracks of all time is from Interstellar. and again, every time I watch Interstellar, I like it more and more. And not necessarily because of the big set pieces, but because of how emotional the story is. And I think the older I get, the more I appreciate the character relationships
Mm.
and things like that. And that's just again, it's such a slow build, but it's another long piece, but it just gets so epic when the synthesizers start to kick in, and it again, he knows film composing so well that he just knows how to pluck those emotional notes, literally and figuratively, as he goes along, and that's why he's one of the greats.
Yeah, it's a really interesting little tune, because it never, I mean, it does have a pattern, but it doesn't ever really quite seem to resolve. Like it
Mm,
kind of keeps going and it kind of needs to go on to another dun, 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 dun,
mm.
dun, 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 dun. And like every time it comes back, it's starting again in a way, in the way it repeats that little tune. Um, and I think that's perfect for a Christopher Nolan movie, who's always
He's
interested in,
obsessed with time.
yeah, he's obsessed with time and how time flows and all that kind of stuff, including in this movie in Interstellar. And so Hans Zimmer captured that kind of perfectly, I think, in that little bit that we just played.
All right, so we only got one more to go.
All right, time for the granddaddy of them all. It's no, I mean this is not going to come as any surprise to anybody, but we got to talk about John Williams, probably the most important uh, uh, film composer of all time. You can music is subjective, but people might not say he's the best, but I don't think there's any doubt that he's the most famous and biggest and probably most important. He was born February 8th, 1932 in Flushing, New York City, another New York City guy. He's won 5 Oscars and been nominated 54 times. Just ridiculous. He studied music at both Juilliard and UCLA, and then was actually a jazz pianist for a while, and was thinking about becoming a concert pianist. But he started doing session work for film studios, and then he actually got a call, a little Canadian connection here, from a Canadian group that were doing a film about Newfoundland. And so this is all information that's in his. There's a very interesting documentary about him, called "Music by John Williams" on Disney Plus right now. I highly encourage everybody to
Oh
check.
yeah, it's an amazing documentary.
Yeah, and so that's where I got the story from. And basically, what he did, he had never scored a film before, but he thought, yeah, this sounds like fun. This is something I'll try out. And he went back and he researched like Newfoundland folk songs, and then tied those themes into what he was making for this film about Newfoundland. Obviously, people liked it because he kept getting work after that and just started scoring TV and movies, to the point that he basically told his wife and his family, look, I'm going to stop performing. I've just got so much work composing that this is basically going to be my job now. Um, which, obviously was a pretty good choice. Um, it's kind of forgotten now, I think, but he had actually already won an Oscar for Fiddler on the Roof and been nominated 6 times before he even met Steven Spielberg. Like he's just so tied with Spielberg these days, that it's hard to remember that he was already a very accomplished film composer before he even met Spielberg. Um, and he had actually, he'd been nominated 10 times before he actually won again for Jaws. And he was already 40 years old. But when Spielberg reached out to him for his first feature film, Sugarland Express, Spielberg was just so, yeah, incredibly impressed with John Williams, and the two of them got along so well that Spielberg basically just decided right then and there, I'm going to use this guy for every single film I make. And he pretty much has. So his big thing that really kind of started launching him to fame, I will play here And it probably doesn't need any introduction, but here we go. So that obviously is the theme from Jaws from 1975. Um, and I mean, it's obviously so famous now, and just, but it just evokes so much that sense of looming dread, how it keeps coming closer, but also the choice to do it all with these really low register bass notes that really gives you the sense that the danger is coming from below, right? Like it's just a brilliant piece of music. You can see, I mean, by this time, I think this was the second thing that he and Spielberg had worked on together. And you can just see how Spielberg must have just been blown away by, oh my goodness, this just elevates my movie so much. And
Yeah,
that's,
it still scares me, and I'm on land.
yeah, yeah. Like you just hear that and you're like, oh shit, something's coming for me.
Yeah.
Like it just gives you that sense. Um, and then so after this movie, Spielberg introduced John Williams to George Lucas, and from there, I mean, wow, it's just like his career has just been ridiculous. Here's just a small list of the films he's scored, and what I'm going to do is I want to read it slowly because I bet that as I list them, for a lot of you watching and listening to this, just saying the title, the theme song will probably just pop into your head for a
Mm.
lot of them. So, Close Encounters of the Third
Oh, go slower.
Kind. Superman, Star Wars, Raiders of the Lost Ark, E.T.
Oh, keep going.
It's not that kind of podcast. So. Home Alone, Schindler's List, Jurassic Park, Saving Private Ryan, Harry Potter. Yes, indeed. And Catch Me If You Can. I mean, just all iconic themes. If you think even just for a moment, you can probably think of them. Um, and again, like we talked about this a little bit with Ramin Djawadi, but even within one film, there's so many different themes that he comes up with and then weaves all together. Like for instance, in Star Wars, I mean, there's a theme for Tatooine, there's a theme for Princess Leia, there's a theme for Han, there's a theme for the Force, there's a theme for the Empire. Like every all of these little themes in Indiana Jones, there's a theme for Marion, there's a theme for Short Round, even from the
Yes.
second film. Like it's just incredible that he comes up with all these, and they're all so memorable and catchy, and just evocative of everything. They're also, you know, they're a lot of fun, and I don't think he would have become the composer of blockbusters if he didn't have a lot of fun as well. And so here's an example, I think, of just how fun some of his music is. Now, this is from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But it is not the one of the more famous indie tunes, but I'm sure people will recognize it anyway. It's called Scherzo for Motorcycle and Orchestra. So you can probably tell me something. Well, you can't actually because I forgot to turn the volume up since the last song. Here we go. So just that's where Indy and his father are escaping on a motorcycle, and they get into like a motorcycle joust. Just a lot of fun, and that is John Williams scoring music for obviously a light-hearted movie where they're running from Nazis uh, in that moment. But obviously, John Williams, he has the just I think unbelievable skill of being both identifiable. Like you can tell when something is a John Williams scored film, but also incredibly diverse.
Mm.
Um, and so like he can do so many different things and play with so many different emotions that here's the next one I'll play. And the last one was fun, running from Nazis. This is the exact opposite.
Eesh.
And yeah, I might tear up a little bit as we play this one because this is just one of the most incredibly most moving pieces of music I think
Yeah,
ever.
I'm
This
sure I
is
know where you're going.
the
Yeah.
the theme from Schindler's List. And once again, I fucked it up.
Mm.
So that is Itzhak Perlman on violin. And in that little documentary that I mentioned, um, Spielberg talks about the moment that John Williams first played that tune for him, and this, not with Itzhak Perlman, just on the piano, played it for him and his wife. And Spielberg said that he basically started crying the moment he heard it, and he told John Williams, "You've done a mitzvah, like you've understood the pain of the Jewish people through this piece of music." And I think it's just, whew, yeah, that's a that's a heavy one. But again, just to goes to show the range of emotions that John Williams can evoke through his music. Um, and I think he's probably the first composer, although I think the Hans Zimmer I think is definitely following in his footsteps now, where he's kind of transcended film.
Mm.
I mean, he was the first composer to really make his music an attraction and not kind of background complementary sounds. It they there are now performances of film scores all over the place, but that really started with Star Wars at the Hollywood Bowl back in the late 70s, early 80s. And it's just grown, and you see that stuff everywhere now. And again, Hans Zimmer, you see concerts of Hans Zimmer's music,
I
obviously,
have
too.
in like 4 months ago. I did. Yeah.
Right. Yes, that's right. I remember that. But again, a lot of that started with John Williams, and he became such a well-known composer just the world at large that he became conductor of the Boston Pops Orchestra from
Hmm.
1980 to 1993. So he's just yeah, as I said, I think he's the most important film composer of all time, and he's just so many themes that we talked about soundtrack of our lives. Those themes are just always with us.
Yeah, and you faded it down uh,
Hmm.
because we can't listen to all these songs. So this will be a 3 hour podcast. But
Yeah,
when the
and I'm
viol
also not sure about the copyright issues.
oh yeah, well,
We'll see.
whatever. Come at us if you
Yeah, we'll see if the YouTube video gets taken
if
down.
you. But when that violin raises an octave, that gets into your spine.
Yeah,
Like that's when you can, like, literally I can feel it chill down my spine when it's a shit right up in there. Yeah. Oh, yeah, incredible. And again, you stole two of my adjectives for the last two composers because you said Silvestri was both bombastic and whimsical,
yeah.
and I've always
Well,
said that Hans Zimmer is bombastic and John Williams is whimsical.
yeah, true. I suppose. Yeah, yeah, that's absolutely true. Um, I'll play one more, John Williams,
Okay.
just to end on. Um, if you got a few more final thoughts, but I'll play one more, unless you have some other things to say first about him.
Okay, yeah, I do. If you go, John Williams, I think, is the king of, first of all, of the blockbuster, as you alluded to. The first quote unquote blockbusters, the two films that made the word blockbuster were Jaws and Star Wars in 75 and 77, respectively. He just happened to score both of those. So, and not only that, but he is just he's also very versatile, like everything from I'm so glad you played the Schindler's List theme because you could have easily just played Star Wars. But speaking of Star Wars, if you watch Star Wars without the score, which is a cut that I've watched, it's one of the shittiest movies ever made. And I'm not joking. It sounds funny, but I've never seen a film, and we've been talking about this with every composer, but I've never seen a film to composer elevation the way that John Williams does it. Just from the very first note of Star Wars with the bum bum, and okay, we're gonna have to watch a 3 minute scroll of exposition that nobody knows what's going on,
Yeah,
but the music is so good, and you know I've come to realize that Star Wars is not that good of a movie. Shoot me if you want,
but
but the acting is terrible. The George Lucas has come out and said that he's not a very good director. He just points the camera at people and they just blurt their lines out lazily. And then we
George
move on.
Lucas is definitely a better ideas man than he is a dialogue writer or yeah. Uh,
But as you said, like the Force theme, like when Obi-Wan's explaining to Luke what the Force is, and we have the dun 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 dun, dun, and
yeah.
Vader and the
Imperial
Imperial theme,
March. Yeah,
all that shit is it's all John Williams.
yeah.
It's all John Williams.
Well, and,
So
and the thing is, I think George Lucas would actually admit it because he is quoted as saying that the music in Star Wars is half the movie.
I would say about 80%.
You don't think you give him enough credit? Okay, but yeah,
So I just wanted to point that out because in preparation for this, I did watch a YouTube video with a couple scenes of Star Wars without the music. It just looks terrible.
okay. I've never watched that. That would be
All right,
interesting.
so I give the floor to you.
All right. Well, on that note, then, this is from Star Wars, not the original movie, though. And I'm just going to leave us with Williams just flexing his composing muscles.
Oh, I
This
hope this
is,
is what I think it is.
yeah, this is as big and grand and dramatic as he could possibly be. So this is from Star Wars: A Phantom Menace.
Yes.
I don't think legally we can play the whole thing. But yeah, that's as I say,
I don't
generally
think I don't
flexing.
think there's anything more to be said.
Nope, not much.
So like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed this one. I think we had a blast doing this.
Absolutely.
So find us on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple, all that stuff, and we'll see you next time on the Unsolicited Film Reviews podcast.
Bye, everyone.